Most founders don't need another list of AI tools. They need to know which job is worth handing over first. By the end, you'll be able to choose that job in your own company. I've built agent systems for research, ads, reporting, and video production. I'll show you 6 signals, then take one messy workflow from raw files to a supervised result on screen. Before we finish, you will score 3 jobs from your own working week. Write a 1-page brief for the strongest candidate and know whether its first result deserves another supervised run. On screen, you will see 3 jobs compared. One fictional onboarding case built inside Codex and the untouched output checked against 4 problems I planted. Your first action is to open last week's calendar or send items and write down 3 jobs you repeated. If you're thinking, I don't know enough about agents to choose one, your knowledge of the work is enough to begin. You can tell whether an output helps, and the brief will expose any success criteria you have not defined yet.
Hey, I'm Johnny Nel. I spent years building businesses the old hard way, managing teams, scaling operations, and doing everything manually. Today, everything I built, from automations and no-code infrastructures to fully AI SaaS products, has AI helping in one way or another. Firstly, let me quickly show you this. In South Africa, we call this a braai. I build with AI tools that, in my opinion, anyone can learn to use. My mission is simple: to help creators, entrepreneurs, and business owners get clarity with AI. Let's build smarter together and enjoy this video.
There is a reason this choice feels harder than the tool demos make it look. A lot of businesses have tried A. Far fewer have turned it into dependable business work. The United States Census Bureau measured overall business AI use between 17 and 20% from December 2025 to May 2026. Among firms with 4 or fewer employees, fewer than 20% reported using it. That matters if you're a small founder, because a small team has less spare time to rescue a vague experiment. Stanford's 2026 AI Index shows the same gap from another angle. In the survey data it cites, scaled agent use was still in single digits across nearly every business function. You can have access to AI and still have no reliable job for it. Does that mean your business is late? That conclusion does not follow from the data. You can avoid the expensive version of being early, where you connect a new tool to a process your company has never defined in writing. A National Bureau of Economic Research paper followed a field experiment across 66 firms. Active users spent less time on email, but giving people access did not measurably change the overall mix of their work. The researchers did not find that access alone redesigned the job. Your advantage will come from choosing a useful piece of work, defining it clearly, and watching what happens over several runs. Begin by examining work from last week before you compare agent platforms for your company. Open your calendar from last week and review the sent items beside it. If your business runs from a task list, shared inbox, etc., use whichever record shows the work people repeated. You are looking for work that returned and delayed a decision. Notice where your team gathered the same evidence for the same kind of review. That repeated handoff is the responsibility you need to name. Write each responsibility at the level of an outcome somebody can inspect. Prepare the client onboarding brief before kickoff gives you a trigger with source material. A person is waiting for the result, and you can decide whether the work is ready. For this walkthrough, I have placed 3 fictional candidates on screen. You can see the fixed appointment reminder beside refund approval, with client onboarding readiness underneath. That is the only comparison you need before we apply the 6 signals. The appointment reminder repeats, but the decision is fixed. A normal automation can most probably handle it more cheaply and predictably. The refund decision contains judgment, but a wrong approval moves money. In my opinion, refund approval is the wrong first unsupervised action for your business. And guys, the onboarding brief sits between those options because it returns whenever a client starts. Its evidence arrives across different documents, and somebody can review the result before a commitment reaches the client. That gives you a useful candidate without forcing your first test to carry your highest consequence. And you might be thinking, the biggest pain in my company is much larger than this. It may be, but your first test needs a boundary small enough to observe. If the job takes 6 departments and 3 systems to explain, you will not know whether the agent failed or your scope failed. Take the 3 jobs you wrote down and circle the smallest one whose result still matters to the business. That candidate is small enough for you to review and important enough for the business to notice if it works. Repeated business drag gives you a reason to care about the job. Your candidate should return often enough or delay something important often enough that improving it would matter. Repetition establishes the business pain, but it does not prove you need an agent. Repetition becomes an agent opportunity when judgment changes the path through the work. Your files vary and exceptions can change the correct answer. The decision depends on context or language instead of one fixed rule. OpenAI's practical guide points to complex decisions, brittle rule systems, and unstructured data as strong agent conditions. When every step is predictable, use ordinary automation and keep the system simple. That judgment needs evidence the agent can inspect. Could you give it the same documents and messages a capable person would use? Your policy should live beside an example that shows how the rule works. If the real procedure exists only in your head, the job is not ready to repeat yet. Your first task is to get that judgment into the brief. Evidence becomes useful when somebody can define a good result. That person should tell you what must be present and what would make the output wrong. Your brief must also say where uncertainty should remain visible. NIST's AI risk management framework calls for you to define the task within its deployment context. It also calls for documented human oversight with measures that fit the work. You do not need a risk department to use that logic. You need one accountable reviewer who understands the job. With that reviewer in place, review has to be cheaper than doing because your human still checks the result. The opportunity exists only if that review can become less work than producing the output from scratch. A high-risk action can stay outside the boundary while the agent prepares the evidence and draft. A baseline keeps one clean result from changing your memory of the old process. Record how your job works now. Then measure how long production takes before noting the defects that matter. You also need to know how long the next person waits before they can act. OpenAI's business guide recommends judging an agent across multiple cycles instead of celebrating one impressive result. If you're saying this still sounds like another checklist, look at what changes when the 3 candidate cards sit on it. The reminder drops out because it needs almost no judgment. Refund approval drops out because the first action carries too much consequence. The onboarding brief survives because its variable evidence leads to a result your reviewer can check against the current process. The reminder stays ordinary automation while refund approval stays outside this first test. That leaves the client onboarding brief as the candidate we build under supervision. Here is the 1-page brief for your test. It is basically the job as your best operator would explain it. Your brief says when the work starts and which evidence matters. It defines the decisions before showing how exceptions must remain visible. Your reviewer gets a precise output, while the final boundary states what the agent may not do. The fictional Maple Kitchens folder mixes assigned scope with the client's intake form. A later email may disagree with either one. The delivery checklist states which missing confirmation blocks the build. One output file gives your readiness decision with citations. Another file becomes your kickoff brief, while the follow-up remains a draft for approval. Every finding has to quote its source file, and an owner can appear only when the files establish one. The boundary is just as important as your output. This version can read your files and prepare drafts. It cannot send a message or change a client record. Your media budget remains outside its authority, and contacting anybody remains forbidden. A secret credential must never be requested. 4 build blockers are planted across those files, but the run does not get your answer key. One required input is absent, and that absence blocks the build immediately. A separate conflict appears only when 2 documents disagree. A third blocker depends on a policy threshold. And the last tests whether the model marks uncertainty instead of choosing a convenient owner. What if your current process has no checklist like this? Do one real example yourself and write down the decisions you made. Your job brief should expose missing evidence before you add another integration. Otherwise, the agent can write a confident sentence from an undocumented assumption. Your brief is ready to run because the required output and its reviewer are visible. Before the run begins, the model can see both the evidence it must use and the actions it is forbidden to take. And guys, if you want to apply this to your own work, the first agent starter pack inside the AI Founders Vault has the 6 signal opportunity scorecard and the 1-page agent job brief. You also get the 10 run validation sheet, the exact fictional onboarding bundle from this video, and the AI Founders community with the rest of the guys building this stuff in practice. The link is down in the description below. Once your job brief is scoped, you need to see whether the agent follows the written instructions while the hidden reviewer answer key stays outside the workspace. I open a clean temporary workspace in Codex and copy in only your job brief with the 4 client files. The reviewer folder stays outside the workspace. So look at your file tree with me. The answer key is not in this workspace. For this run, I use Terra on high reasoning. I'm using Codex here because it lets you watch each source file being inspected and open the result beside the evidence. You can apply the same brief wherever your agent can read those files and return work for review. I ask it to stop after writing 3 files. The readiness decision must cite the exact supporting words. Each finding explains what it prevents, and ownership remains unresolved when authority is missing. Nothing in this task allows it to send your draft. The model reads every supplied source before it starts writing your deliverables. It states that the build is blocked by a launch date conflict, a missing business manager ID, no confirmed final decision maker, and missing written finance approval. That sounds right, but the spoken summary is not your deliverable. I wait for the files and let the process exit. Now, your output folder contains all 3 requested files, each ready to open beside its evidence. Isn't this just one large prompt? Your first useful version does not need an impressive architecture. It must inspect the right evidence and respect your boundary throughout the run. The result must return in a form you can judge. OpenAI recommends starting with 1 agent, while Anthropic recommends adding complexity only when the work requires it. Do not add a second agent because the diagram looks better. Add complexity after a specific failure shows your current design cannot handle the job. Okay, the hidden reviewer file expects 4 build blockers. The signed scope sets the launch for the 21st of September, while the intake and current email request the 14th of that month. The Meta Business Manager ID is missing. The final creative approver is still Sasha or Priya, and Sasha says her final authority is not confirmed. The monthly media budget is 75,000 Rand, above the checklist's 60,000 Rand threshold for written finance approval. Now, I compare the untouched readiness report with that key. It finds 4 out of 4 build blockers. It records 0 build level false positives and invents 0 owners. The report also names 3 confirmations that your team will need later, and you can read them on screen. They are not current build blockers. The report explicitly labels each one launch, not campaign build, which matches your checklist boundary. The kickoff brief keeps confirmed facts separate from unresolved matters. The follow-up email asks for the same 4 items needed to clear the build hold. It remains a draft and nothing gets sent. Dude, that is a clean first result. I expected the walkthrough might expose a miss that required a second run. It did not, and I'm not going to manufacture one for the story. So what does this result prove after you compare it with your key? One supervised fictional case passed once, which tells you the job deserves another controlled test. Production reliability remains unproven. We have not measured time saved, and your agent is not ready for unsupervised operation. You might ask, if the first run was correct, why should I keep reviewing it? You have not measured the gain yet. You have created a result that can be measured. Run cases that represent your real work and record your review burden. Watch for the kind of mistake your hidden key did not include. Research on AI performance gives you a reason to stay this strict. In the Jagged Technological Frontier experiment, AI improved work done by consultants on tasks inside its capability boundary. On one selected task outside that boundary, participants became less likely to reach the correct answer. Your job can move across that boundary when the inputs or exceptions change. That means your agent stays supervised while you test it against more representative cases. What happens after your first supervised result? You choose keep, change, or stop across several runs. A job stays supervised when it repeatedly finds the required facts and keeps uncertainty visible. Your review also needs to become lighter than producing the work. If a failure exposes vague instructions, the brief changes. When an undocumented exception caused the failure, the missing evidence belongs in your process. There is no reason to continue when review costs as much as doing the job, or when the consequence cannot be contained inside your approval boundary. For this onboarding case, the decision is keep supervised. 4 out of 4 blockers on one run is enough to continue testing. It is not enough to send the email automatically, update a live client system, or call the job reliable. Your 10-run validation sheet begins with the old baseline beside each result. Record any defect before you add the human review time. Your decision comes after each case. Use work that represents the awkward edge cases your company sees. If your agent only passes the clean examples, you have measured the examples rather than the job. And guys, your context is your context, so take from this what makes sense for your business. This is not a prescription for what you should do, and there are no outcomes guaranteed here. You can make your first move today without buying another tool. So what you do is open last week's calendar and review your sent items beside it. You write down 3 jobs that repeated and choose the smallest useful one where judgment exists. Then you check that the evidence is available before asking somebody to define a good result. Your review should be capable of becoming cheaper than doing, and your current process should give you a baseline. The mission here is to help non-technical founders build useful AI systems with evidence behind them. In the next video, I want to put this supervised setup through repeated cases and show you the edge case that breaks the current brief. Which recurring job are you considering first? Put the job in the comments and tell me what evidence already exists for it. I will be replying because your examples will show me where the selection process still feels unclear. If you feel called to it, then subscribe to follow the journey. See you in the next one.